And let's talk about Alice herself, because that was the most wanted part, I think, in recent Hollywood history.
Well, I'm told it's pronounced Wasikowska, but Tim Burton seemed to have a different way of pronouncing it. But anyway, what she brings to the part is she brings Alice into a modern perspective, in that Alice in the original stories is very reactive. She's a character to whom things happen.
Yes.
And in this version, she is proactive, really proactive.
Got you. And also, I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but also I'm just excited about Alice, but in other depictions of Alice, she's much younger.
Yes, well,
whereas
here
this is a proper girl. She's in a Victorian garden
years
party.
Old.
Yeah.
I mean, the idea is, of course, that she's had a dream of this place when she was a child. Many times she's returned to this place in her dreams, and now, on the cusp of womanhood, as it were, she falls into the rabbit hole when all these terrible things are going on in her real life, and she rediscovers this world that she thought was just a dream world, but it is actually a real world. What she gives to the part, I think, is something which is... there's something immensely vulnerable, like the Hatter's character, and it's why they bond in the film. There's a vulnerability, but there's also something about coming of age, which is, in fact, I think, in a way, what the film is probably all about. Coming to understand yourself, your place in the world, your sexuality, all your emotions, and testing them out, and also realising that for a child of that era, that you were able to stand up for yourself in a world where grown-ups made all the decisions. So she becomes, I mean, there's some moment towards the end, which I don't want to give away too much, but she does take on the quest to kill the Jabberwock, and she's kitted out rather like Joan of Arc in silver armour, and she suddenly becomes, she's no longer the Victorian girl, she's the liberated fighting woman, which is quite extraordinary. So, it's a fine performance from her. Anne Hathaway is equally bizarre as the White Queen.
Freakishly beautiful.
Yes, I'm told that Tim Burton was inspired by Nigella Lawson. I don't know whether that's true, but there is a scene, we heard a little bit of it there, where she concocts a potion for Alice, and maybe he had seen some of Nigella Lawson's broadcasts, I don't know. But I think the underlying interesting thing is that in a way what Linda Wolverton, who wrote the screenplay, who wrote Beauty and the Beast and The Lion King, and what Tim Burton have done, is look at Lewis Carroll's world almost through the sensibility of an American classic of this a little bit later, but the seminal children's book of America, which is The Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
Because as in the film of The Wizard of Oz, where, if you remember, all the characters that we see later, the Tin Man, the Lion, and so on, they're all prefigured by characters, farmhands around Dorothy's farm. The wizard is the medicine man, Professor Marvel. The witch is the bad school teacher, the schoolmistress, Miss Gulch. So exactly the same thing happens. At the garden party, Alice sees all these characters, people, strange characters. They're not the characters that are in Wonderland, but they have similarities. There's a pair of twins. There's a very matriarchal Victorian woman who's complaining about there being white roses in her garden instead of red. So there are all these little similarities. The real world foreshadowing it, and of course the Red Queen, White Queen, Queen of Hearts, White Queen, whatever they're meant to be, are very much like the good witch, bad witch in The Wizard of Oz. Very, very similar.
I have a couple of questions. I think people's expectations, and maybe I'm just talking about myself, are going to be unbelievably high.
I think they are.
Really, really high. Is this film, it's a weird question, but bear with me, is it satisfying enough? I don't want to feel bedraggled afterwards. I want to feel concave and delighted.
I think it is, and I think it is for two reasons. One is because I think that the setting, I mean, Tim Burton was talking to me about what it's like filming without actually there being any scenery there, but the settings are extraordinary. I mean, the garden with live flowers, the sense of these huge topiary animals in hedges, of giant mushrooms, of doors that lead to nowhere. I mean, the whole of that is so beautifully realised, and it's quite extraordinary. Visually very, very exciting, vivid, vibrant. Funnily enough, thinking of The Wizard of Oz, I thought, how odd that they decided to make the whole film in 3D, because, in fact, just as in The Wizard of Oz, where you suddenly burst into colour when you go into Oz, you could have
3D,
burst
yeah.
into 3D when they went into Wonderland. I don't know why they missed that. Probably thought that people would be complaining that their glasses weren't working or something.
Yeah.
The 3D, to me, didn't really add a lot. And the fact that it was added after most of the filming had been done, so it's been done technically rather than in the camera, I think shows
some
difference,
difference, right.
you know. But the March Hare throws teacups at you and things like that. But it didn't, to me, add enough.
Okay.
But the really interesting thing is that, you know, this character, Alice, like Long John Silver, like Peter Pan, like Ebenezer Scrooge, Sherlock Holmes, this character's left the tender, loving care of the person who created it. They've become a character in popular culture now.
Yes.
And they're out there, and people can do what they like with them, really. And I think we always find it fascinating what they do.
What they do,
with
especially
them.
somebody like Tim Burton.
Absolutely.
Brian, it's been a pleasure. I could talk about this for days, but instead maybe we should all just go and see it. Brian Sibley, thank you so much.
Thanks, Scotty.